Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning, whichever is appropriate for your location. Welcome to this webinar on sustainability risks at Glencore. My name is Elizabeth Umlas. I'm a lecturer in business and human rights at the University of Fribourg and a senior advisor to IndustriALL Global Union in the area of investor engagement on workers' fundamental rights, and I will be your moderator. This webinar was organized by IndustriALL Global Union, which represents 50 million workers in 140 countries in the mining, energy, and manufacturing sectors. Its membership includes unions representing thousands of Glencore workers at Glencore assets in over a dozen countries. The host of the webinar is the Committee on Workers' Capital, an international labor union network for dialogue and action on the responsible investment of workers' capital. The CWC connects labor activists and asset owner board members from around the world to promote information sharing and joint action in the field of workers' capital. I'd just like to give a few words of introduction and give you it will be 1 hour long, and the purpose of the webinar is to provide participants with information about Glencore that they might not already have seen, and to help surface questions ahead of the company's annual shareholder meeting, which is tomorrow, but also to surface questions for the medium and longer term that we hope can contribute to constructive dialogue with and about the company. We have 3 panelists whom I'll introduce in just a moment, who will speak during the first half hour, and after all 3 of them have spoken, we will open the floor to questions. So we won't do questions until after all have presented. You can type your question into the questions box of the control panel. On the right-hand side of your screen at any time, you'll see the questions box. And in the second half of our session, I will read out submitted questions for our panelists to answer. Could you please specify in your question if it's for a specific panelist? And please try to be brief. If we run out of time, panelists will be able to provide a written response after the webinar. Note that all callers at the moment are muted, and callers will continue to be muted throughout the call. We are recording the webinar, and we can share this with attendees afterwards. And we are under Chatham House rules. So if you would specifically like your name to be mentioned when your question is asked, simply note that in the question box. Otherwise, we will not announce the name of the person asking the question. A briefing doc, which was a document which was prepared by IndustriALL, which includes suggested questions for investors and others to pose to the company, will be sent to you. And just a very quick backdrop note on the company, which perhaps I should have noted at the outset. Glencore is a multinational corporation based in Switzerland. It's one of the world's largest producers and marketers of commodities, including metals, minerals, coal, and oil. And as many will be aware, the company is under scrutiny on a number of environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, issues, some of which our panelists will now discuss. So without further ado, I'd like to turn to our first panelist, Mr. Antoine Mach. He is the co-founder and managing partner of Covalence SA, a Geneva-based company specializing in ESG ratings and thematic investments. He is going to give us an overview of the sustainability risks associated with Glencore's operations and why these matter to investors and other stakeholders. Antoine, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. So as a start, I suggest to consider the presence of Glencore in sustainable and responsible investment funds and indices. So according to sustainableinvestment.org, which monitors sustainable investment funds in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, Glencore only belongs to one fund, and it belongs to none of the 40 sustainability indices which are monitored by this organization, such as the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, FTSE4Good, etc. So from this premise, we can suppose that Glencore has not very good environment, social, and governance ratings, because these ratings are usually used by sustainable and responsible investment funds. So is that true? Let's look at what Sustainalytics is stating. So Sustainalytics is one of the leading ESG rating agencies in the world. For that agency, Glencore is an average performer with a high level of controversies, as you can see on this slide. For Thomson Reuters, Glencore has a good ESG score, which has improved from C to A- since 2010. But however, the level of controversies here also is very high. It has gone from D+ to D- since 2011 and the IPO. So Glencore gets a poor ESG combined score. And for our own company, Covalence, we get a mediocre grade of C, the highest being A and the lowest being D. So the consensus between these three rating agencies is certainly the high level of controversies relating or naming Glencore. So let's get into a bit more details on the rating Covalence has on Glencore. In a few words, we use a multi-source approach and we combine a disclosure score, which is based on ESG indicators disclosed by companies themselves, with a reputation score, which reflects stakeholder perceptions. On this chart, you can see the disclosure score on the horizontal axis. So here, Glencore gets a good disclosure score of 76 out of a total of, or maximum of 100, while the sector average is at 60. So this means that Glencore is more transparent and more advanced in terms of ESG policies and commitments compared to its peers. Now, on the vertical axis, you see the reputation score. And there, Glencore has a poor result of 24 out of a maximum of 100, while the sector in average gets 52%. To calculate this reputation score, we gather and classify news items naming the company and published by the media, NGOs, trade unions, and other stakeholders. We use sentiment analysis to distinguish between positive news reflecting endorsements and negative news reflecting controversies. Let's have a look at controversies first. The level of, as you can see on this historical chart, the level of controversies has increased since 2011 when the company became publicly listed. And since that time, it has generated more criticisms than in the past. Now, let's consider positive comments naming Glencore on ESG and ethical issues, what we call endorsements. So the level of endorsements has been decreasing since the IPO in 2011. And one should also say that a substantial part of endorsements registered before that year actually related to Xstrata that was acquired by Glencore in 2013. And the data of the two companies has been merged in our system. To come out with a reputation score, we calculate the ratio of positive news over the total of positive and negative news. And with increasing controversies and decreasing endorsements, the ESG reputation score of Glencore has gone down over the last years, as it shows on this chart. Nowadays, Glencore only registers around between 20 and 25% of positive comments. In our database, major topics impacting Glencore's ESG reputation are legal issues, workers and workplace, community, trade unions, and pollution, mostly in Australia, Canada, Colombia, Peru, and South Africa. Considering materiality for investors, the main business impact of this ESG data deals with risk, operational, regulatory, and reputational risks. The market of sustainable and responsible investment represents between 25 and 30% of total managed assets, and it grows faster than conventional investments, according to the latest Global Sustainable Investment Review. For Glencore, being absent of most sustainable and responsible investment products and indices may represent a direct problem in terms of access to capital in the future. Indirectly, this could affect talent acquisition and retention, and potentially also license to operate. So now, what are the choices for investors? In a summarized way, I would suggest that value-based investors, which mostly use the exclusions, best in universe, or engagement approaches, will either avoid investing in Glencore, or they will invest in order to engage with the company. Secondly, sustainability-oriented investors, which use the best-in-class approach, tend to avoid investing in Glencore because Glencore is not a best-in-class. And finally, for mainstream investors who increasingly integrate ESG factors into financial analysis, well, it depends. If they only consider ESG disclosure, then they can invest in Glencore because it has a relatively good score in that dimension. But if investors also consider reputation, they might hesitate. It depends on their level of tolerance to controversies and their risk analysis. And it depends on the materiality they attribute to controversies and reputation. And finally, to conclude on a positive note, there are areas where Glencore shows interesting initiatives and could be encouraged to do more. In my perception, I would mention the overall strategy, where the integration of sustainability is one of their top 3 strategic priorities. And in more, I would say, in the selection of issues or topics, I thought it's interesting to note that Glencore has promising credentials and commitments regarding tax transparency, local sourcing, and peace building in Colombia, for instance. So I think that's it for now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Antoine. We will go directly on to our second presenter, Dr. Claude Kabemba. He is director of the Southern Africa Resource Watch, an organization based in Johannesburg, which focuses on mining development, looking at business and human rights, revenue management, mineral linkages, corporate social responsibility, and mining community mobilization. His remarks will be on the social, environmental, and financial impacts of Glencore's operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. Claude, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I think I need to start by saying the Southern Africa Resource Watch is a human-based organization. We work across the Southern Africa with key activities in Congo and in Zambia, where Glencore has its activities. As Glencore in the DRC, for example, trades under the name of Kamoto Copper Mine Company and Mutanda. Glencore entered the DRC as a buyer for copper and cobalt, working with Trafigura. It lent money to small and medium producing companies with very high interest rates. Most of these companies were taken over by Glencore So the argument we are putting forward is that Glencore strategy is not just to be the biggest producer of copper and cobalt, but is to have the monopoly
Claude, do you have
copper and cobalt in the DRC and Zambia.
Sorry to interrupt, Claude, do you have a headset that you're using right now? We're just having some feedback on the audio.
The majority shareholder in Kamoto through its subsidiary company. Glencore is also a majority shareholder in Bumi. In terms of the supply chain, Glencore produces most of its cobalt and copper industrially. The question that most of you will be asking is, does Glencore trade in minerals extracted through child labor or pregnant women? It is not easy.
So we are having a technical difficulty, I'm sorry, with the equipment on this line. So we're going to go to our third speaker, Mr. Kemal Özkan, and hopefully we will be able to fix the glitch with the equipment that Dr. Kadama is using, and we'll come back to his presentation. So Mr. Kemal Özkan is the Assistant General Secretary of IndustriALL Global Union. He is in charge of sectoral activities of the organization and has operational responsibility for the chemical and pharmaceutical sectors. He will now speak about labor-related risks at Glencore's operations overseas, and he will also touch on examples of companies that have addressed this type of risk in their operations. Kemal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to greet everyone online at the moment. As you mentioned, Liz, IndustriALL Global Union is the organization representing workers in the operations of Glencore worldwide. Just before the annual shareholders meeting tomorrow, and we are here in Switzerland with the representatives from the countries where the company has big operations. So the main issue for our meeting is to look at where we are and to get the main and correct information from the ground. And this is one of the issues that the company is now facing with particularly getting proper information from the ground. So as you see in the relevant part, we have prepared a handout covering three the main segments: workers' human rights, supply chain risks, and transparency and disclosure. And this report is available on the basis of the testimonies and reports that we received from our ground. The first part is related to labor. And I can report here that Glencore claims that it wants to be a sector leader when it comes to the health and safety. It is an ambition, and it is identified as a top priority. And the so-called zero tolerance, this approach is used to be in a way this as a disciplinary approach, and for avoiding any kind of the reporting on accidents, incidents, near misses, and diseases. And when we look at the ground, the right to know, right to shut down, right to participate is not in the place. The general politics and the practices of the company related to health and safety is just liability avoidance and putting everything over the shoulder of employees. And we see this kind of examples in different countries, like Bolivia. Production is the production-based payment is in place, and workers feel pressure to produce more, putting their health and safety at risk. And time to time, they are also threatened with closure. And the same in Zambia, in Mopani mine, and we are reported that so there are some medical reports falsified. There are no regular checks up. And again, there is a clear policy of transferring blame, liability from employer to victims and suppressing about reporting. Last but not least, in Democratic Republic of Congo, even the basic working conditions for food and eating areas are not provided. And even workers are forced to eat with some toxic chemicals and without proper health care, health protection, with very low salaries. And in Colombia, I can tell you that. So last year there were 13 work accidents. And in Zambia, some technical staff are forced to work 24 hours underground without going out. Even there are some exceptional cases. People have been forced to be underground for 2 days. Another important matter I want to report in this webinar is about the outsourcing the workforce. And when we look at the 2017 figures, 60,000, 62,000, and 43% of the workforce of Glencore is outsourced. And these people perform more or less 50% of total hours the worked. And the main issue here is this casualization of the workforce is just done for the sake of running away from liability of pension, health coverage, and without having responsibility. And there are also some the cases like in Cerrejón in Colombia, and the company was fined over the issue of excessive use of third-party contractors, and this creates quite the risk for the company. And another important issue I want to report here is about breaking industrial the relations. And the company in its official documents makes a commitment to working honestly and openly with labor unions at all of its locations and treating all employees with respect. We are very much questioning and challenging this statement, since it is not coinciding with what it happens in reality. Look at the 230-day lockout in Australia, which costed 450 million Australian dollars in lost production, and it was against the interests of employees, but at the same time, it is against the interest of shareholders, because of this abusive and conflictual labor relations in all the operations. And I can give you the similar examples from Prodeco mine in Colombia, no negotiation as single employer, and same in Antapacay in Peru, and some technical staff not recognized with their freedom of association. Union. In addition, I can report you here that the company tries to create in-house structures to get rid of democratically organized workforce. This is another important risk for the Glencore. And I want to give you a special report about Democratic Republic of Congo, which provides more than 60% of world's cobalt. IndustriALL Global Union conducted a fact-finding mission in copper and cobalt mines. And I can report here that the situation is really alarming, with the very mistreatment of workers directly contradicting Glencore's claims. What we observed and reported that there was a systemic human and workers' rights abuses ranging from constant threats of dismissal, poor health and safety, occupational diseases over the contamination, unfair, unjust job classification, low remuneration, inferior salaries for local workers, particularly in comparison with the foreigners. And the company is making quite huge the records in profits, and they want to increase their the cobalt production, particularly for increasing electric batteries for auto companies, Apple, Samsung, and all smartphone producers. And however, there are some basic issues which are not addressed. Let me tell you, and for long shifts, like 12 hours underground, workers are not provided sufficient drinking water. And there is no the proper safety conditions over there. So this is why it is quite important to note here that there is a huge supply chain the risk here for Glencore and Glencore shareholders. And one last thing I want to mention here is that Glencore, as one of the leading companies in the sector, needs to be able to put the similar practices with its competitors, like Rio Tinto, with which IndustriALL Global Union already agreed on global principles and forming a joint committee to observe, to monitor the implementation. Same with Anglo-American, ArcelorMittal, and participation in initiative for responsible mining and insurance. And we demand from the company to stop abusive and conflictual labor relations in its operations and open up a new approach for a global dialogue with IndustriALL and its affiliates representing employees of Glencore worldwide. And this is the first round from my side. Liz, if there are some other questions, then we can enter into some discussions on important issues like supply chain, like transparency and disclosure, as we outlined in our investor brief called Glencore Below the Surface. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Kemal. And we will now try again to go to Dr. Claude Kabemba. As I say, he will be talking about social, environmental, and financial impacts of Glencore's operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. Claude.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us for a moment. We're having some issues connecting with Claude, but if you could just stay on the line, we will resolve this issue as soon as possible.
In the meantime,
even maybe we can use this.
in the meantime, we have a question for Kamal, which we can begin with. So this is a question for Kamal that comes from Hassan Lorgat at Benchmarks Foundation. Is the union's strategy structured on asking difficult questions, or is it supplemented through buying of some shares or shareholder activism? This is a question for Kamal.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Our objective is to make sure that Glencore operates in a sustainable way. And we want to create an environment whereby there is a win-win situation for the company, for workers, for communities. So this is why we just bring proper, correct information from the ground through our members. And we just want to have a proper stakeholders dialogue with the company, not just talking, but also at the same time engaging in joint actions and the problems, risks that are identified in different countries. This is what we are seeking. Our objective, again, is to open up a genuine dialogue with the company to move forward and for the benefits of everyone, all stakeholders, particularly for the workers. This is our main objective that I want to raise, and shareholders should know what is happening on the ground. I believe this is an important transparency and disclosure issue, and particularly in the developing international standards on supply chain, such supplements, such information from the ground will be beneficial to the company in developing its activities, action, and policies in different fields.
Okay, thank you very much, Kamal. We are hopefully now going to go to Claude, who's going to restart his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could just get Claude to take Elizabeth's headset, that might be a solution to the problem, at least for the audio part.
Yeah, I was talking about the supply chain. Glencore, the cobalt that comes from Congo is posing problems.
there isn't cobalt that is produced by artisanal miners, where you have children in the site. Here we want to make it categorically that Glencore produces industrial gold, cobalt and copper, and is not involved in artisanal mining. But there are some of his sites, the Mutanda site and the Kamoto site, which are invaded by artisanal miners. And it is very difficult now to link Glencore to the warehouse, which are owned by Chinese and Lebanese who are selling, who are buying these artisanal minerals. But that does not say Glencore cannot buy this product, which is coming from artisanal mining. The possibility is that when this product reaches Zambia or South Africa or China, it's possible that Glencore might buy those things. So the possibility for the Glencore supply chain to be damaged by this artisanal product is still there. But within Congo, Glencore produce its cobalt industrially. On the environmental side, the Kamoto mine, for example, that belongs to Glencore, is reputed for polluting water in Kolwezi. The mine of Mutanda is also known for polluting, having an impact on the natural reserve of Kando. Many NGOs have reported on that. In Mutanda, the vegetation, when you visit, is being affected by the gas emission from the Glencore activities. Fish in the Lualaba River is affected. Some species are disappearing, and the quantity is diminished sensibly in that river. So Glencore really activities is having an impact on the environment. The question is what type of intervention Glencore can introduce to reduce this gas emission that is destroying the environment, that is polluting water, and sometimes polluting the soil and undermining food security. As far as the social side is concerned of Glencore work in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there isn't a very serious social investment done by Glencore in town, in that province. When you look at the cities of Musonoi and Kapata, are affected by the houses there are having cracks, and those cracks are presumed to come from Glencore's mining activities. But Glencore denies this. But then I think as an important big international organization, Glencore might want to invest in serious investigation to see what is damaging those houses and take responsibility. On labor and human rights, we know that as soon as Glencore bought the company, he replaces quite a number of managers, Congolese managers with foreigners. In Glencore's work, collective bargaining is not accepted. Workers are forced to produce more at night. You know, when you work hard at night, there are risks of serious injury. Glencore wants also production, but does not respect workers' rights. And that, I think, is important for an international organization, a company like Glencore, to take cognizant of that. In terms of transparency, I think Glencore lacks transparency in its operation and transaction. Glencore is known to be very quite corrupt, linked to very much tax evasions. But also what you've observed that Glencore in Africa does most of the time capture the state. Very much corrupt politicians, and politicians lack the capacity to have to control Glencore, to have on what Glencore is doing whether in the environmental aspect or in terms of tax evasion. And what about in Zambia? I think Glencore in Zambia trades as Mopani Copper Mines. It has activities in Mufulira and Kana. When you look at Mopani and the Kamoto copper mines in the DRC, they are very structured in such a manner that the company is able to evade taxes. In Zambia, the mine of Mufulira is reputed for its emission of sulfur beyond the authorized limit, and plumb beyond 90 times above the limit. The sulfur acid is injected in the air, pollute the soil and water. But recently, Glencore built in a new copper smelter and acid plant to minimize that sulfur acid, and that has reduced that emission. But the population in Mufulira continues to complain about air, water, and soil pollution. It means that Glencore needs to invest more again in ensuring that it eliminates to the maximum that sulfur emission. Glencore is asked to pay, for example, recently damage for the death of a politician who died due to sulfur dioxide emissions. It is copper, because of its copper production. The court ruling may trigger new pollution claims from communities around Glencore mines. So Glencore has really a responsibility to look very seriously into its production. I think in both the DRC and Zambia, Glencore violates the OECD guidelines across the board. It manipulates production costs and quantity. It manipulates the metal prices in effort to avoid paying taxes. For the past almost 50 years in both the DRC and Zambia, the company has never made benefits, and that's problematic. Why does it remain in business if it's not making benefits? And Glencore continues to mistreat workers and does not take responsibility for human rights abuses created by its operation. And I think that is an induction on a company of the magnitude of Glencore to be able to resolve those. Thank you for this first round.
Thank you very much, Claude. We have, sorry. Okay, we are going to go back now to some discussion. So we do have one question which we are going to answer later. This is a question to Kemal, and we're going to have somebody within IndustriALL who's familiar with this initiative come back later. But a question from Amnesty International: how does IndustriALL consider Glencore's participation in the voluntary principles on security and human rights, and whether this initiative has some effect on the company? So we will come back to that. If there are further questions, please do send those. In the meantime, I will put some questions to our panelists. One question for Kemal: can you expand a bit on global dialogue? You say that one of the stated goals of IndustriALL is to have a global dialogue with the company, and you have achieved this as a global union with other companies. What does a global dialogue look like in terms of format and themes, and why should investors be interested in such a dialogue?
Oh, thank you very much for the question, Liz. I believe this is very important. The mining industry globally needs to be transformed. I believe this transformation can only be done through a genuine dialogue among the stakeholders, with the inclusion of governments, with the inclusion of employers, civil society, and of course trade unions representing employees. And this is why it requires a global initiative, global drive, and following the international norms and standards applicable to all the operations in the mining industry. And as it is one of the leading companies in the sector, Glencore is also offered such dialogue from our side. We want to have a dialogue at global level for a standard setting for all the operations of the company, and for a joint monitoring and implementation on crucial issues like fundamental rights, like health and safety. And our global dialogue is not something for replacing local level the dialogue and bargaining. On the contrary, we want to make sure that so there is an environment in the operations of the company on the basis of the globally agreed principles and standards, that the local level industrial relations, social dialogue happen in a proper way. I believe, and the IndustriALL Global Union does believe that. So dialogue, a genuine dialogue, is something important and beneficial to all the relevant parties. Indeed, when we talk about dialogue, it is not just talking or listening. It is important, essential. However, it should not be just limited to talking and listening. It needs to come to a joint articulation and also joint monitoring and implementation, and for the benefits of the company and also its employees throughout the world. This is what we are offering and expecting from the company to do as response to our the global level demand.
Thank you, Kamal. I have a follow-up question for Antoine, and that is, you, in your presentation, you talked about the company's disclosure of its policies and procedures. And the question is, what about impacts or the company's performance on the ground? Is there a good way to measure that in this methodology that you were explaining? Antoine?
Okay. Yes, Lisa, thank you for this question. Impact measurement is a big challenge, especially for such large companies. But even also at the level of small and medium enterprises in the field, in the growing field of impact investing, there are a lot of, I would say, of expectations and ambitions in terms of impact measurement. Usually analysts consider that it is less difficult to measure environmental impacts than social impacts. At our level, at Covalence, we do rely on, you know, we work from Geneva. We use a lot of possibilities in terms of searching information on the web. So we try to have a very diversified set of sources, which includes both, I would say, global media sources, as well as international NGOs or trade unions or other types of CSR experts and analysts and observers. But we also try to monitor local sources via different channels, including the monitoring of specific Twitter accounts. So we are obviously not able to do our own investigations on the ground. We rely on the work of, I would say, of analysts, experts, activists, etc. And maybe a last comment is, yeah, in the world of ESG analysis and ratings, which is applied to large companies, it is true that we are more into measuring degrees of transparency, policies, commitments, rather than real world impacts. And so I'm afraid we are into we can handle perceptions, be they positive or negatives, controversies or endorsements, but we don't have an objective way to really measure impact, and in particular social impact on the ground. We have different proxies, we have different news items, information pieces that give us an idea or a proxy of what the impact of a company is, rather than a direct measurement. This said, we also try to monitor what companies are disclosing at a more local level in terms of their subsidiaries. The problem is that usually the ESG indicators disclosed by companies have a very high degree of aggregation. You know, you have one number summarizing the policy of a company in terms, for example, of training suppliers on health and safety at the global level, at the group level. So it's difficult to see. Probably a company is doing good things and efficient programs in certain countries, and is having more trouble in other countries. And it's true that for us, at least when you only consider ESG indicators disclosed by companies in via sustainability reports or ad hoc questionnaires, that's a big challenge. The fact that the data is very aggregated at the group level, and we do lack local information. This is why we try to complement this process with a number of more multi-source, diversified sources, including local sources that can give us insights on local situations. That's yeah, over to you, Liz. I was done with my reply.
Thank you very much, Antoine. We have another question that
It looks like Liz's audio has...
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So this is a question for both Claude and Kamal from Resource Matters. The speakers say that the main concerns in Congo are about Glencore's workers' rights and about the presence of child labor in its supply chain. In Congo, the most direct worry right now is arguably that 5,000 to 8,000 workers will lose their job if and when the Kolwezi court orders to shut down Glencore's KCC joint venture. What can and what will IndustriALL and Southern Africa Resource Watch do to protect the rights of those workers if this were to happen? Kamal, would you take that first, and then we will pass the next part of it on to Claude?
Sure. Thank you very much for this question. And first, let me tell you that we are in favor of the mining operation, and mining operation should be there, so mine workers can also be in place. So this is why we believe that a mining operation can and must be done by providing proper working conditions and recognizing fundamental rights, workers' rights, for proper health, with proper health and safety, the environment. So this both can go hand in hand, and this closure cannot be used versus deterioration or dismantling the workers' rights. So this is why there should not be that kind of the comparison or conditionality about going on. We believe the mining activities should continue in place over there, and also at the same time this mining activity should be done, must be done with the proper the working conditions in communication, consultation, dialogue with the workers and communities over there. So this is why these are not alternative to each other. These are the things that complete each other for a sustainable mining activity. This is why this is our offer. Then it can be done. The cobalt, copper, these are the minerals of which prices are increasing, and the Glencore particularly is making quite big profit. And there is no any reason to close down, shut down the mine. On the contrary, with such booming prices, with such the booming profit, it should be possible to install the proper environment and the infrastructure to operate the mine in a sustainable way, in a proper way. This is our offer. And again, we offer our dialogue, we offer our cooperation to Glencore, to headquarters, to the local management over there, through our national affiliate, to work together on this for securing the interests, rights of all relevant parties. This is what I can tell at this stage.
Thank you, Kamal. Claude, would you like to jump in, since the question was also to you?
Yes, I think there is a real risk that workers might lose their jobs if indeed Kamoto copper mine is dissolved following Jeka Mine's court case. But I think when you look at the relationship which has been there between Jeka Mine and the Glencore, this situation was could have been avoided if both actors were quite serious about the type of business they were engaged in. I think they need first to review that relationship to ensure that proper mechanism for accountability is put in place. And Glencore, I think, can easily demonstrate goodwill that is not only interested in the bottom line, but is also interested in the economic development of the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the upliftment of the workers, so that this case is resolved as soon as possible, because the possibility for Glencore to resolve this financial problem is got the capacity to do that. I think it's more on Glencore's responsibility to show goodwill. The mines that Glencore is extracting are potentially very rich in cobalt and copper. So I think the ball for me is in the camp of Glencore to really come out strong with goodwill and responsibility, because in terms of the agreement, Glencore has not satisfied the requirement. He was supposed to be showing benefits in his operation, but 10 years down the line, he has not shown benefits. I think Gécamines is within his right to take this action, and Glencore has recognized that they are in discussion with Gécamines, but the only way to resolve it easily and in a sustainable manner is for Glencore to take responsibility and inject financial resources in the operation to ensure that indeed the Congo and its partner Gécamines start to collect some benefits from those operations. So really that will be my answer, if to avoid the laying out of so many workers.
Thank you very much, Claude. We have come up to and just gone past the hour. I'm mindful of keeping to our hour. We have a couple of questions that we were not able to get to, and as I say, we will put those to the panelists and we will get written responses to you on those. And as I said at the outset, a recording will be made available of this webinar. We'd like to thank you for your participation, and apologies for the technical glitches along the way. We would encourage you to take these specific questions and concerns that you have and raise them with the company in through whatever channels that you have as investors, as civil society organizations. And thank you very much for your participation. Have a